charming heart of New Kampala, two brothers who share no blood but the same scar tear each other apart for the love of one woman. While a hidden fortune, a dead mother's last wish, and a ruthless gang race toward them like a storm they can't outrun. The night Tunde arrived at St. Mercy Orphanage, it was raining so hard the wind nearly tore the roof off. He was only 3 years old, shivering and soaked, clutching a rusty spark plug in his tiny hand like it was gold. He didn't cry, not once. Just sat in the corner of the hall, watching everything like a stray dog waiting to be kicked. Kwame had already been there a year. He was 4 then, quiet, soft-spoken, the kind of boy who helped the younger ones eat before he touched his own food. That night, he crept over to the new boy and shared half his dry bread. Tunde didn't say thank you. He just took it and nodded once. That was enough. They grew up like that, side by side. Tunde was hot-headed, always ready to fight. Kwame was calm, always pulling him back before he got into too much trouble. When the older boys tried to bully Kwame, Tunde stood in front of him, fists clenched. When Tunde got caught stealing extra food, Kwame took the blame. They were never adopted. Nobody wanted boys who were already half-grown and full of fire or silence. But they had each other. That was their comfort. That was their curse. The orphanage didn't have much. Some days, they ate plain maize and nothing else. The roof leaked. The matron was tired. But the boys survived. They shared everything, from a pair of broken shoes to a torn comic book. Nights were the hardest. Tunde had nightmares. Kwame read quietly until he fell asleep. By the time they turned 16, they had become more than friends. They were brothers, not by blood, but by pain. They made a promise under the old mango tree in the yard one night after sweeping floors for hours. We never leave each other behind, no matter what. They meant it then, every word. But life doesn't always keep promises, not even the ones made in the dark between two boys who had no one else. By 16, Tunde was already fixing engines like a pro. He'd leave the orphanage at dawn, carrying a small rusty toolbox, and head to the local mechanic yard. The owner, Uncle Duro, paid him peanuts, but Tunde didn't mind. He liked the noise, the grease, the way broken things could be made to work again. Kwame found his escape in food. He cooked at the back of Mama Said's canteen, cutting vegetables and stirring huge pots of rice and beans. He never spoke much, but when he did, it was always about the flavors, how certain spices could bring comfort, or how pepper could hide sadness. His food made people smile, and that made him feel seen. Every night, they returned to the orphanage tired and covered in either oil or smoke. They would sit by the gate, count their coins, and talk about the families they never knew. Tunde thought maybe his parents had been too poor to keep him. Kwame wondered if his mother had died in childbirth. They never knew the truth, and it ate at them more than hunger ever did. One day, Tunde found an old flyer near the market. Union Trace Agency, we find your lost family. The cost? More than either of them could ever imagine, but still, they started saving. Every coin went into a cracked plastic jar they hid under their bunk. They worked harder, took double shifts, skipped meals. Tunde started fixing radios and old TVs. Kwame sold meat pies on the side. They believed, really believed. But life didn't care about belief. When an infection swept through the orphanage, many of the younger kids fell sick. Medicine was needed, urgently. They didn't even talk about it. They just took the jar and handed it over. Every last coin. The woman at the pharmacy said they were heroes. But that night, they sat outside, staring at the empty jar. Not angry, just quiet. We'll try again someday, Kwame said. Tunde nodded, but deep down, they both knew it might never happen. They had buried more than money that day. They had buried hope. Tunde was under a dusty Corolla, arms deep in its guts, when he heard a car sputter to a stop just outside the mechanic yard. He wiped his face with an oily rag and stepped out, expecting another tired engine with no money behind it. But then he saw her. She stood beside an old cream-colored Peugeot, one hand on her hip, the other shielding her eyes from the sun. Her hair was in a loose bun, her dress simple but clean, and her face calm, like she belonged somewhere far from the noise and smoke around of her. "Engine won't start," she said. Her voice was soft but firm. Tunde nodded and popped the hood without a word. He was good with cars, but even better with reading people. She looked like someone used to being helped, but not used to waiting. "Battery's dead," he said, fiddling with wires, "and this carburetor is crying for mercy." She smiled. "Can you fix it?" Tunde grinned back. "Give me 10 minutes and a cold Coke." 15 minutes later, the engine purred. She looked impressed. He pretended not to notice, wiping his hands clean as she stepped forward. "I'm Ima," she said, handing him a small card. He took it, eyes scanning the logo, a Duke Hope Foundation for Forgotten Children. "Nice name," he said, tucking the card in his pocket. She got into the car, rolled the window down halfway. "You're good at this." "I try." The Peugeot drove off in a cloud of dust. Tunde watched it until it disappeared around the bend. Then he pulled the card back out and stared at her name. Emma Aduke. There was something about her. It wasn't just her face. It was the way she looked at him, like she saw more than grease and sweat. Like she saw a person. For a long time after she left, he stood there with the card in his hand, engine noise fading behind him. And for the first time in months, he smiled. For real. Kwame didn't care much for crowds, but work was work. That night, he was catering a charity dinner at the tallest glass building in New Kampala. He wore a borrowed white shirt, too tight at the neck, and moved quietly between tables, making sure the dishes came out right. He'd spent hours perfecting the jollof rice, slow-cooked, smoky, with just enough pepper to make people feel something. He was proud of it. While refilling trays at the back, he heard a soft voice behind him. "This smells like home." He turned. It was her, Ima. She wore a dark green gown that flowed like water. Her makeup was light, but her eyes were sharp. She looked nothing like the girl with the broken-down Peugeot, yet everything about her still felt familiar. Kwame froze, unsure if she remembered him. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" she asked politely. He shook his head. "No, just—" "I cooked that rice." She smiled. "It's amazing. Tastes like something my grandmother would have made." Kwame didn't know what to say, so he nodded. He wasn't used to compliments. They talked, just a little, about food, spices, childhood, and the memories tied to taste. Ima said she traveled a lot, but missed the street food in places like Agache and Overi. When she laughed, it was real. No pretense. No charity face. Kwame didn't say much, but he listened well. She liked that. Before she left, she asked for his name. "Kwame," he said quietly. She nodded like she'd remember it. Then she was gone, swept into a crowd of politicians and donors. Kwame watched from a distance, still holding a wooden spoon. Something about her made the world quieter. Not easier, just still. He packed up late that night, alone. His fingers smelled of garlic and thyme. He tucked the memory of her laugh deep in his chest, where it felt warm. He didn't know her last name. Didn't know anything, really. But as he walked home through the sleeping city, he knew this. She wasn't just another guest. She was someone who saw him. And for someone like Kwame, that meant everything. Tunde had been saving for weeks. Skipping lunch, fixing extra bikes, even selling one of his favorite old radios. All for a silver necklace. Not too flashy, but clean, with a small letter E charm. He planned to give it to Ima on her birthday. He didn't know if she'd take it, or if she saw him the way he saw her, but he wanted her to know. Kwame had done the same. He worked longer hours at the canteen, baking pastries through the night. He sold off his only Bluetooth speaker, all to afford a simple chain with a small heart pendant, wrapped neatly in a white box. He didn't tell anyone, not even Tunde. On the day of her birthday, they both ended up at the same jewelry store, just minutes apart. Tunde stepped out first, holding the velvet bag in his hand, a small, proud smile on his face. Then came Kwame, tucking the receipt into his back pocket. He looked up and saw Tunde. For a moment, both froze. "What are you doing here?" Tunde asked. Could ask you the same, Kwame replied. They didn't need to say it. The looks in their eyes said enough. Tunde's hand tightened around the gift bag. Who's it for? Tunde asked anyway. Kwame stayed silent. Tunde reached into his pocket, pulled out the card Ima had once given him. Ima, he said. I met her weeks ago, helped her with her car. Kwame's face changed. Not shocked, just hurt. I met her too, he said. At a dinner. I've been seeing her. The space between them grew colder. She didn't tell me about you, Tunde said, voice low. Maybe because she didn't know how, Kwame answered. Neither one moved. I'm not backing down, Tunde said. Then I guess neither am I, Kwame replied. They walked away in opposite directions. Neither spoke that night, not a word. The next day, their apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The laughter, the jokes, the old stories, they all vanished like smoke. And just like that, the crack that had once been invisible between them split wide open. A woman they both loved had become the storm they never saw coming. They stopped talking. Tunde started coming home late, covered in grease and smelling like fuel. Some nights, he didn't come back at all. He said nothing to Kwame, not even when they crossed paths in the hallway. Kwame stayed quiet too. He worked longer hours in the kitchen, barely touched the food he cooked. He began sleeping on the couch, leaving the room they once shared cold and empty. They became strangers in the same house. But deep down, both were waiting to see who would give up first. Then Ima made her choice. She invited Kwame to the park near the old orphanage. No crowds, no noise, just trees, wind, and truth. She looked him in the eye and said it straight. You see me in ways I didn't even know I needed. I want to try with you. Kwame didn't smile, not fully, but he nodded, and for the first time in a long while, his chest felt light. He didn't know how to tell Tunde. He didn't get the chance. That night, Tunde saw them together, by accident. He'd been riding past the park when he caught the sight. Ima's hand in Kwame's, both of them laughing, standing too close. His heart didn't just break. It shattered. He went home, threw his tools across the room, smashed the frame that held their childhood photo. The one where they stood, arm in arm, under the mango tree. Kwame returned hours later. The silence was thick. Tunde finally spoke. So this is it? Kwame didn't argue. I didn't plan for it to happen this way. You should have walked away. I could say the same to you. They didn't yell. They didn't fight. But what hung in the air between them was heavier than fists. Love had turned into something sharp. They lived under the same roof, but it felt like war. The necklace Tunde had bought stayed in his drawer, untouched. The poem Kwame had written for her remained in his notebook, unfinished. What they once called brotherhood now sat like glass between them, cracked, splintered, and cutting them both every day. It had been weeks since they last spoke. Tunde still worked late, drowning himself in street races and engine noise. Kwame stayed buried in the kitchen, quietly building his name, now working with big clients through Ima's charity. They were still under the same roof, but everything between them was gone. Then, one quiet afternoon, someone knocked on the door. A man in a black suit introduced himself as Mr. Aid from Union Trace Agency, the same agency they had once tried to pay years ago. Kwame stood frozen as the man handed him an envelope. We've found your mother, he said. Her name was Kanyisa Aduk. Was. She passed away 2 weeks ago. Heart complications, made worse by stress. She had been searching for you her whole life. Kwame's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside were old photos, letters she'd written to a son she never got to meet. A will, a trust, everything. She had never stopped looking. She left her entire estate to you, the man added softly. All of it. Her company, her assets, her name. Kwame couldn't speak. He sat down slowly, clutching a photo of a younger Kanyesa, smiling, full of life, holding a baby blanket in her arms. She was only 17 when she had you, the man explained. She was raped, gave birth in secret, She couldn't face the child, so she gave you up, but she never forgave herself. The house was quiet. Even Tunde, overhearing from the hallway, didn't know what to say. Later that night, Kwame sat alone in the dark, holding one of the letters. I never stopped praying you'd find me. But if I leave before you do, please know I tried. Everything I built was meant for you. Tears rolled down his face. Not for money, not for the empire, but for all the years he had believed no one wanted him, and now that someone finally did. She was gone, forever. Word spread fast, too fast. It didn't take long before the streets were talking. Kwame Mensah, the quiet orphan boy from St. Mercy, was now the sole heir to the Adak Empire, worth billions, and with fortune came danger. A small-time gang from the slums caught wind of it. They figured Kwame wouldn't have time to learn how to protect himself. Just another rich boy with no street sense. Easy target. They planned to snatch him up before he could even claim his inheritance. Hold him for ransom, maybe more. Tunde heard about it through a mechanic he used to race with. A whisper in the middle of the night at the back of a rundown garage. At first, he froze. Then, without thinking, he grabbed his jacket and his old bike. He hadn't spoken to Kwame in weeks. He was still angry, still hurting. But this was different. He rode through the storm. Rain lashed the roads, thunder cracked like gunshots, but he didn't stop. His heart beat faster than the engine. He didn't know exactly where or when, but something in him said, "Go now." He caught up just as it happened. 2 black vans blocked Kwame's path as he left a quiet meeting with the agency. They grabbed him fast, hood over his head, arms tied. Tunde didn't slow down. He crashed straight into one of the vans, sending metal and glass flying. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Fist, pipe, foot, whatever he could use, he used. The gang was bigger, but Tunde was faster. One of them pulled a gun. The shot rang out. Kwame screamed. Tunde dropped to the ground. The gang fled before backup arrived, tires screeching into the rain. Kwame crawled to where Tunde lay, blood pooling beneath his shoulder. "You came," Kwame whispered. Tunde coughed, gave a faint smile. "One shadow, remember?" The rain kept falling, but for the first time in a long time, something between them broke, not the anger. The silence. Tunde survived. The bullet had missed anything vital, but just barely. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital, hooked to wires, fading in and out of sleep. Kwame never left his side. He sat beside the bed every day, watching over the same brother he had nearly lost twice, once to pride, and now to a bullet. Sometimes Tunde woke up angry, other times quiet. But never once did he ask about Ima, and Kwame never brought her up. There were no speeches, just slow, heavy silence. But it wasn't sharp anymore. It was tired, wounded. One morning, Kwame slid a document onto the bedside table. "I'm giving you full ownership of a garage in the city. A Duke Auto, brand new, clean space, top equipment. It's yours." Tunde looked at it but didn't speak. "It's not a favor," Kwame added. "It's a thank you for saving my life, for being my brother, even when I didn't deserve it." Tunde nodded once, quiet, unreadable. He healed slowly, physically at least. When he left the hospital, they didn't hug. They didn't say goodbye. They just went separate ways. Kwame moved into a new apartment with Emma. Their wedding was small, quiet, no headlines. Emma wanted peace, not cameras. Tunde didn't attend. He stood far off that day, across the road, helmet in hand, watching from behind a line of jacaranda trees. He saw them smile. He saw Kwame look around, searching the crowd for someone who wasn't coming. And when they kissed, Tunde turned away. Not because of hate, but because the pain was still there, sitting in his chest like a stone he couldn't swallow. He loved his brother, still, always. But some wounds take longer to close, even when the bleeding stops. That night, he opened the garage, switched on the lights, ran his hands along brand new tools. The place was quiet, but it was his. And in that quiet, something like forgiveness started to grow. Not loud, Not fast, but real. The city was quiet that morning. Even the usual noise felt softer, like the world was holding its breath. Tunde stood in the middle of his new garage, staring at the freshly painted walls and gleaming tools. Everything was perfect. Everything. Except the ache in his chest. He had it all now, his own place, his own name on a signboard. But the silence reminded him of what he'd lost. Not Ima, not the fight, his brother. Then came the knock, slow, gentle, familiar. Tunda opened the door to find a small delivery box. No driver in sight. He brought it inside, placed it on the workbench, and opened it. Inside was a worn-out book of poems, the same one Kwame had carried since they were teenagers. The one he never let anyone touch. Tunde flipped it open. On the first page, in faded ink, was a new letter, written in Kwame's hand. To the brother who taught me to fight when I only knew how to stay silent. To the shadow who walked beside me when the world forgot we existed. I lost you once. I won't lose you again. When you're ready, come home. At the bottom was a hand-drawn map, back to St. Mercy Orphanage, now turned into a youth center. One room circled in red. The room they once shared. Tunde closed the book. His hands shook. For the first time in a long while, he let himself feel everything. Anger, grief, love, guilt, all at once. He didn't rush. He took the rest of the day, cleaned the garage, left instructions with his assistant, and packed a small bag. By sunset, he stood outside the orphanage gate. It had changed. New paint, new roof, but the smell of burning firewood in the distance was the same. Inside, he walked slowly toward the room marked on the map. The door was slightly open. Light spilled from it. Kwame was there, sitting on the old bunk bed, a plate of rice between them, just like the first night they met. He didn't speak. Neither did Tunde. Instead, Tunde sat down, picked up a spoon, and ate beside him. No questions, no apologies, just presence. Because sometimes that's enough. They didn't go back to what they were. They started something new, quiet, honest, unbreakable. And as the night deepened, laughter slowly returned to the hallway where two boys once dreamed of family. But as the lights dimmed, one question still hung in the air. Can love truly heal what pride once broke? The end. If this story touched you, please drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The next tale could be the one you never knew you needed. Thanks for watching.